My name is Noah. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I finally stopped being the family investment. For as long as I can remember, my parents only saw value in people who were useful. Not kind, not consistent, just useful. As long as you did something for them, you mattered. If not, you were invisible, and I was their favorite tool. Growing up, I was the substitute babysitter, unofficial janitor, unlicensed accountant, and eventually, the full-time manager of their family business, a moderately successful consulting firm they started in the late 90s. Except I wasn't a co-owner, not even a partner, just the workhorse. It started small. Noah, can you update the invoices this weekend? Hey, can you take some calls while we're in Palm Springs? Next thing I knew, I was handling payroll, scheduling client meetings, managing the website, and preparing quarterly reports while they traveled half the year. They called it semi-retirement. I called it being exploited. By 24, I was running the business solo while living in their basement. They told friends I was learning the ropes. They told me it was all for my future. But every time I asked about formal ownership or even just a paycheck, the conversation turned, "We're housing you, aren't we?" My mom would say with a smile, "You're not motivated by money, right? You're better than that." Meanwhile, my brother Caleb received a $70,000 loan to launch his startup that lasted 6 months. My sister Evelyn got help with her mortgage 3 times, but me, I got a leaky ceiling in the basement and endless expectations. I missed my college graduation because they booked a last-minute vacation to Costa Rica and someone had to stay behind to hold down the fort. I told myself it was temporary, that it was a test, that one day I'd be rewarded for being the dependable one. But then Christmas happened. We were hosting, that meant I did the decorating, the meal prep, and the shoveling after a snowstorm. I strung up lights alone while my parents argued over wine. Caleb flew in from Chicago and strutted around the house like he was a CEO instead of a part-time crypto blogger. Evelyn brought her third husband and barely made eye contact. I didn't expect praise. I'd stopped expecting anything years ago. But what I didn't expect, what hit like a punch to the gut, was what my mom said mid-dinner. We were sitting around the table, the roast was carved, the wine was flowing. Caleb was complaining about stress while my dad nodded like he knew the burden of real work. Then, with a laugh and a sip of Chardonnay, my mom looked at me and said, "You're almost 30, Noah. It's time to stop leeching." At first, I thought I misheard her, or maybe she was joking. She wasn't. The room went silent. Even Evelyn blinked. Caleb chuckled and said, "Maybe he's holding out for the inheritance." No one said a word to defend me. I didn't respond. I just sat there, frozen, as the people I had given my entire 20s to casually gutted me over ham and dinner rolls. They moved on like it hadn't happened, laughed, poured more wine. Later that night, back in the basement, I checked my phone. That's when I saw it. A fresh Instagram post from my mom. A photo of Caleb smiling next to a brand new Tesla, caption for always being there. That's when it all clicked. I wasn't just underappreciated, I was resented, because I made myself too available, too convenient, too invisible. And that's when the plan began. I walked upstairs, calm and quiet, past the dishes, past the leftovers, straight into my dad's office. I flipped on the desk lamp, opened the drawer, and pulled out the flash drive I had hidden there 6 months ago. Just in case, I plugged it into the desktop and logged in. Admin access, all under my name. In 3 hours, I did what I should have done years ago. I revoked their logins, rerouted the email servers, changed the banking credentials, and filed the ownership documents that I had quietly prepped long ago. I didn't steal the business. I took back what I was already running. When I was done, I left the flash drive on the desk with a label, "Good luck without me." I didn't slam a door. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out. By sunrise, I was 6 hours away on the coast, renting a small Airbnb with a sea breeze and a clean break. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls I didn't answer. They would figure it out soon enough. And when they did, that's when the real story began. The first voicemail hit my inbox at 7:12 a.m. It was my mom. Her voice tight and falsely cheerful, like she was performing for an invisible audience. "Noah, sweetheart, I think there's been some kind of glitch. Your dad can't get into QuickBooks, and the main website says access denied. Can you call us when you see this?" 15 minutes later, my dad called. His message was anything but calm. Noah, what the heck is going on? I can't get into anything. Peterson says our vendor logins are bouncing. I swear, if this is some kind of tantrum, click. Then came the third voicemail. This one cracked. You think this is funny? You think this is revenge? We built this for you for your future? You owe us? Noah. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on the small balcony of my rental, coffee in hand, listening to the tide roll in while the sun came up behind the coastal cliffs. Laptop open on my lap. I drafted a brief email to the 10 largest clients. Professional tone, no drama, just the facts. As of today, I, Noah Whitaker, am the sole managing partner of Whitaker Consulting Solutions. The responses rolled in within the hour. Most weren't surprised. A few congratulated me. One wrote, "About time." That one hit deep. At noon, I checked Facebook, and there it was. A vague, passive-aggressive post from my mother. It's heartbreaking when your own child turns on you after everything you sacrificed. You think you know someone. No names, just implication. A masterclass in guilt tripping. But the comments, they were gold. Aunt Mara. Wait, wasn't Noah the one running the business for years? Uncle Greg? Didn't y'all just come back from Paris? A childhood friend? Wow, guilt tripped the golden goose much. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Watching their illusion crack in real time was better than any reply. By the next day, they were spiraling. The calls turned into texts. The texts turned into emails. First denial. This can't be legal. We can fix this. This is a misunderstanding. Then guilt. Your father hasn't slept. My blood pressure's been up since Christmas. Think about your siblings. And finally, threats. This is our company. We'll take legal action. You've embarrassed us publicly. That's defamation. You've made a mistake you'll regret. But I'd spent months prepping for this. Every account, every document, every trail was clean and legal. The LLC was now registered under my name. The emails all mine. The website domain mine. They had nothing but hurt feelings and a broken illusion. The tipping point came 3 days later. A text from Caleb. Casual, condescending. Hey man, they say you've been overreacting. They want to talk. Let's be adults. Also, FYI, they're thinking about selling the company now. Said I might oversee it, so we should probably coordinate the handoff. I stared at my screen, stunned, before laughing out loud. Caleb, the same guy who forgot the company email password for 3 straight years. The guy who asked me to file his LLC paperwork because the form is confusing. Now he wanted a handoff. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged back into the back-end system and tightened the firewalls. Any shadow access was deleted. Every password changed. I rerouted the servers through new hosting and enabled 2-step verification tied only to my devices. The flash drive I'd left behind was now outdated. By the 72-hour mark, they were officially locked out digitally, legally, emotionally. Then the silence came. No more calls, no more texts, no vague social posts, just quiet. And that quiet, it felt like breathing for the first time in a decade. For years, my identity had been built on fixing things for them, jumping in, cleaning up, absorbing blame like a human sponge. Without that noise, I didn't know who I was, but I liked the version that was beginning to emerge. That night, I went for a long walk through the neighborhood. No destination, just the ocean breeze and the sound of leaves whispering overhead. For the first time, I noticed how beautiful the silence could be. But peace doesn't last forever. Not when there's more to uncover. I was mid-call with a client the following week when someone knocked on my door. Not a delivery, not a neighbor. My heart froze as I checked the peephole. It was Evelyn, my sister, the sideline player, the one who never took a side, never stirred the pot, always stayed safe in the middle. I let the call go to voicemail and opened the door. She looked tired, frazzled, wearing the same Patagonia jacket she's had since college. Her eyes were puffy like she hadn't slept. Hey, she said softly, I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say anything, just stood there. I found something, she added, holding out an envelope. In Dad's drawer, figured you should see it. I didn't take it at first. What is it? She swallowed. A loan agreement. In your name? I blinked. What? And they took out a line of credit. 4 years ago, used your name, forged the signature. My stomach dropped. I snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside were copies of 3 documents. A $70,000 credit line, my name, my social, my signature, a poor imitation, but close enough to fool a banker. And then, tucked into the back, a canceled check, made out to Caleb. I sat down. Slowly, my hands trembled. My parents hadn't just used me, they'd shackled me with debt. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." I couldn't even speak. My thoughts were spiraling how many payments had been made. What was the interest? What damage had already hit my credit? They never intended to let me go. They were going to keep me in debt just long enough to bleed me dry and leave me with the cleanup. I looked up at Evelyn, my throat dry. "Did you tell them you came here?" She shook her head. "No, and I won't." "Why are you really here?" Her voice cracked. "Because I'm tired too." "Noah?" That silence. It wasn't so empty anymore. I didn't sleep that night. The loan documents sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. I stared at them for hours, flipping them over and over, hoping some fine print would explain away the betrayal. But no, it was real. It was blatant, and it had my name all over it. They'd forged my signature, used my credit, and funneled the money to Caleb. My parents didn't just undervalue me. They didn't just exploit me. They criminally sabotaged me. And for what? A fancy vacation? Another shot at making their golden child into something shiny to parade around online. I wanted to scream, break something. Instead, I made a decision. In the morning, I sat across from Evelyn on my small balcony, a cold mug of black coffee between us. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "I'm going to a lawyer today," I said. She nodded. "Will you write a statement about what you found? Where you found it? What you know?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. Then, after a pause, "They did something similar to me once, not as big. A joint credit card in college. I didn't know until I tried to buy my first house and the mortgage application flagged it. Of course they did. The manipulation wasn't just calculated, it was a system, a pattern. I was just the most profitable cog in their machine." That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Deirdre, a recommendation from an old client who'd once fought a messy inheritance battle and won. She was sharp, precise, and made zero small talk. Just my kind of person. She read through the documents, asked for ID, signatures, and additional records. After a few minutes, she looked up. "This is bank fraud," she said plainly. "Forgery, possibly identity theft. We can sue. We can press charges. It'll be messy, but it's winnable. What happens if I do nothing? Your credit will take the hit. The debt will stick. Eventually, they'll default or disappear, and the collectors will come after you. Best case, you pay it off and eat the damage. Worst case, it ruins your financial future." I exhaled slowly. "And if we pursue this, we file a fraud claim with the lender, lock your credit reports, submit a formal complaint. If the forgery is verified, and it will be, we pursue civil charges, maybe criminal depending on state laws. And what happens to them?" Her voice didn't change. "They could face jail time. I didn't want that, or at least I didn't think I did. What I wanted was for them to be exposed not just legally, but socially. I wanted every lie unraveled, every mask torn off. I wanted people to know exactly what kind of parents they were. But I also wanted peace. And the only path to peace, I realized, was control. So I gave Deirdre the green light. The dominoes fell fast. I filed the fraud report. She sent a cease and desist to the lender. Evelyn signed a notarized affidavit confirming discovery and context. A forensic signature analyst flagged 3 key inconsistencies between the forged docs and my known legal signature. Then came the civil suit filing. That was the day the mask cracked for good. The moment the legal notice was delivered, my mom called. No fake sweetness this time, no performance. She was shrieking. "How dare you air this in public? Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" I calmly read the statute. She violated forgery with intent to defraud, Penal Code 134.3. Maximum 10 years and a $100,000 fine. "You think this makes you look good?" she hissed. "No," I said. "It makes me look done." She hung up. Then came Caleb's turn. His approach was smoother, too smooth. "Hey bro, I think we should talk. Clear the air." "Sure," I said. "Let's talk about the canceled check in your name from a fraudulent loan." Silence. "You didn't know I asked. You just thought 70 grand fell out of the sky." Click. My dad never called. Instead, he posted a dramatic Facebook update about betrayal and the child who turned on us. The comments were not kind. People remembered. They remembered me staying behind to run the business. Me showing up to every family event with spreadsheets and project plans, me working through holidays, me missing out, and now they were watching the house of cards fall. 2 weeks later, their attorney reached out, a proposed settlement dropped the charges, and they'd transfer the remaining business assets to me, sign over the house, issue a written apology, pay full restitution for the forged loan and the resulting credit damage. Deirdre asked what I wanted to do. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush the answer. I thought about pressing charges, about seeing them squirm in court. I thought about the headlines parents forged son's identity to fund other sibling. I thought about the satisfaction. But then I remembered I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom, so I accepted. They transferred the deed to the house, the one I once lived in, moldy basement and all. They paid off the loan, plus legal fees and interest. They signed a notarized statement admitting the forgery, ensuring I'd never be liable again. And then I blocked them. No dramatic farewell, no final email, just a quiet, deliberate goodbye. A few months later, on my 30th birthday, I sat at a seaside cafe with Evelyn and 2 college friends I'd recently reconnected with. Someone asked how I was celebrating. I smiled, pulled out 3 small envelopes, and handed them each one. Inside invitations, grand opening, coastal strategies and solutions, a new kind of business, fully mine. They laughed, they toasted, and as I looked out at the waves, I realized this wasn't just a new year, it was a new beginning. The thing about power is, once you finally get a taste of it, you begin to realize just how little of it you ever had. For almost 30 years, I was the family's workhorse, the dutiful son, the fixer. I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet long enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally see me, love me. Turns out they only saw what I could do for them. And now that I wasn't doing it anymore, they were unraveling. After the settlement, I thought it might end quietly. I thought the restitution, the apology letter, the transfer of the house and business assets would buy me silence, maybe even closure. But I underestimated how fragile their ego was without control. It started with a rumor small, almost laughable. A family friend messaged me, "Your dad says you blackmailed them into signing over the company." I didn't reply, didn't need to, because the signed documents were right there in my fireproof lockbox. Legal, ironclad, undeniable. Then came the second wave. My mom had apparently been calling around to extended family, crying about how I'd destroyed their retirement, claiming I'd hacked their accounts, that I bullied Caleb, and that I'd always been emotionally unstable. Classic projection. But again, the truth had receipts, screenshots, emails, handwritten notes, the forged signature, the forensic analyst's report, and best of all, their own apology letter signed, dated, and legally binding. Still, it bothered me. Not because I feared anyone would believe them, but because they couldn't stop themselves from trying to win back a narrative they'd already lost. They couldn't handle being exposed, couldn't handle being powerless. So, I made a choice. If they wanted attention, they could have it. I wrote a post not on Facebook, not on Instagram, but on LinkedIn of all places. Just a quiet, matter-of-fact update. After years of managing a family-owned consulting firm with no formal recognition or compensation, I've officially taken ownership and rebranded it into Coastal Strategies and Solutions, built on transparency, accountability, and a commitment to integrity. Here's to new beginnings. The support was overwhelming. Former clients messaged me saying they'd suspected something was off for years. Industry contacts congratulated me. One even referred me to a major nonprofit project that became our first 6-figure contract. Within 2 months, I had a small team, 3 employees, an office lease, a real payroll system, health benefits, everything I should have had from the start. Then the kicker, Caleb reached out. On LinkedIn, he messaged me like nothing had happened. "Hey man, congrats on the new business. We should grab coffee soon. Would love to chat about some potential synergy opportunities." Synergy. The same guy who took a $70,000 gift from a forged loan in my name? The same guy who let our parents bleed me dry and laughed at me over Christmas ham. Synergy. I didn't respond. But I did take a screenshot, and I sent it to Deirdre. She replied, "If he contacts you again, document everything. He may be fishing for a way back into the business. We'll file a no-contact order if needed." I wasn't afraid, not anymore. But I wasn't going to let them slip back into my life like nothing had happened either. The reckoning wasn't just about legal revenge. It was about emotional clarity. So, when the third wave came, the public one, I was ready. Mom tried to sue me for defamation. filed a complaint claiming my public statements had ruined her reputation, caused emotional distress, and impacted her future career opportunities. The woman hadn't worked in 6 years. The suit was dismissed in less than a week. Judge didn't even let it proceed to discovery, called it frivolous and retaliatory. Still, the damage was done. To them, because that filing it became public record, and a journalist one who specialized in family-run business disputes picked it up. 2 weeks later, there it was. Son uncovers family's financial betrayal, reclaims company after parents forge loan in his name. The article didn't name them, just referred to Mr. and Mrs. W., but anyone who knew us, they knew. The story went mildly viral. Nothing huge, just a few thousand shares, but enough. Enough for people in their social circles to start asking questions. Enough for the masks to slip, and when the truth came knocking, their house of cards didn't just crumble, it disintegrated. Their country club membership gone. The family friends they used to brag to gone. Caleb's supposed startup quietly folded within months. They became social pariahs in their own world. And I just kept building. Coastal Strategies grew faster than I expected. We landed 3 nonprofit accounts, 1 corporate sustainability project, and a local government contract. I hired a full-time admin, a junior consultant, and an operations manager named Rosa, who basically became my right hand. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about replacing everything they withheld from me with something real. Real support, real recognition, real peace. But one last twist remained. A letter came in the mail. About 7 months after I took ownership, handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. No greeting, no sign-off, just a short message in my father's handwriting. You'll regret what you've done. You're still our son. Blood matters. I burned it. No rage, no sorrow, just a quiet finality. Because blood may matter, but so does truth. And truth, finally, was on my side. Spring rolled in with a calm I'd never known. My days were busy: client calls, team meetings, lunches that didn't involve microwaved leftovers in a moldy basement. I had weekends, vacations, a therapist who didn't ask me to justify every boundary I set. I had peace. And Evelyn, she was part of that now too. She started helping part-time with operations at the firm. Quiet at first, almost timid, like she wasn't sure if she belonged. But over time, she bloomed. She was good with people, organized in a way I never had the patience to be, and clients adored her. We didn't talk about the past much. It hovered around us like an old scar, visible, tender, but not infected anymore. Then one Tuesday, I got a call that cracked everything open. I was walking out of a lunch meeting when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. But something made me stop mid-step, pull over on a bench outside the cafe, and listen. The voice was familiar, dry, precise. Mr. Walker, this is Kenneth Brighton from Brighton and Meyer Trust Services. We need to speak urgently about the estate of Richard and Helen Walker. I froze. My grandparents. Both had passed years ago. My grandfather in 2018, my grandmother the following spring. I hadn't thought of them much since. They'd been kind but distant, the old-school kind of family who sent birthday checks and rarely picked sides. Why was a trust lawyer calling me? I called back. Kenneth Brighton's voice didn't waver once as he explained, "Your grandparents established a family trust in 2009 shortly after your father was hospitalized for a business-related accident." Okay. The trust includes real estate assets, investment holdings, and a split disbursement plan that was to be executed when their youngest grandchild turned 30. My birthday. Kenneth continued, "The original trustees were your parents, but your grandfather added a codicil in 2017 shortly before his death, naming you as the contingent beneficiary and executor. That clause was sealed until now." I couldn't speak, my mouth was dry. Kenneth didn't pause. "The codicil included a caveat. If your parents or any trustee were found to have committed financial misconduct against any beneficiary, full control of the trust would revert to you." I sat in silence, heart thudding. "The documents and forensic evidence you filed in your fraud case satisfy that condition," he said matter-of-factly. "Mr. Walker, effective immediately. You are the sole trustee of the Walker Family Trust." I blinked. "What? What does that mean?" "It means," he said gently, "you now control the entire estate, estimated at approximately $3.2 million. The world tilted. I stammered something like "thank you" and ended the call. Then I just sat there, on that bench, while a family of tourists walked past, laughing over a spilled scoop of ice cream. While my coffee went cold, while my whole childhood rewrote itself in my mind, they knew. My grandparents had known what my parents were capable of, and they planned for it. A failsafe, a time bomb, a legacy handed not to the golden child, but the scapegoat. Me? I didn't tell Evelyn right away. I didn't tell anyone. For a week, I went to work like normal, ate dinner in silence, watched sunsets wondering what kind of man my grandfather must have been beneath the silence. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, I drove to the old family home. Not to confront, to see. The house had fallen into disrepair. Paint peeling, lawn patchy, an air of desperation hung over it like mildew. I knocked once, no one answered. I let myself in with the old key I'd never returned. Inside, it was worse. Boxes everywhere. Unopened mail. Caleb's startup brochures stacked near the fireplace like they could magically fix everything. No one was home. I left the trust notification and legal paperwork on the kitchen counter, topped it with a copy of the notarized statement they'd signed during the settlement, and one line I scribbled in Sharpie. This didn't happen to you. It happened because of you. Then I walked out. 2 days later, Evelyn and I sat on my office balcony, sun dipping low. I finally told her everything. She didn't cry, just held her mug and stared at the skyline. They never thought you'd matter, she said quietly. Turns out you were the only one who ever did. And as the sky turned gold, I realized this wasn't just revenge. This was legacy reclaimed. My name, my story rewritten not with rage but with resolve. Not every war ends in fire. Some end in silence and a signature, and some begin again with a knock on the door from a lawyer who says, "They planned for you." Story 2. Dinner at the Martinez house was rarely peaceful, but this Sunday was something else entirely. The same dry, overcooked meatloaf sat on the table alongside limp green beans, the kind of meal that made you wish you were anywhere else. Yet I had one thing to say, one sentence I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head. I'm going on vacation this week. The words cut through the stale kitchen air like a knife. My sister, Laura, froze mid-chew. Her fork clattered onto the plate as if she'd just been told I'd sold the family home behind her back. I always knew you were a traitor, she spat, eyes darting around the room like she needed backup for her accusation. Mom didn't even look at me. She just muttered under her breath, barely audible but sharp enough to sting, "You and Tom always rely on him. He's selfish. I just canceled every credit card he has access to." Then, louder, she added, "You just can't rely on me anymore." Dinner exploded into chaos. Laura's voice rose in fury. Mom screamed like she was trying to shout me out of existence. Dad sat silently, chewing his food like it was none of his business, the way he had for years. I didn't say a word. I let the anger roll over me. This wasn't about a vacation, not really. It was about the unspoken rule they'd written around me: no family, no kids, no spouse, so I was just a cash machine and free labor. I existed to fill their holes. Mom hadn't worked since her mysterious illness years ago. Laura had launched 3 failed businesses, all bailed out by me. Credit card debt, car repairs, groceries, utilities, vet bills for her pets I didn't even know paid for by me. So no, it wasn't about Hawaii. It was about finally doing something that was mine alone. Something they couldn't weaponize or guilt me over. I pulled out my phone and, without a word, started canceling every credit card they had been using as a lifeline, the same cards tied to my name. After a long silence, I said quietly, "You can't count on me anymore." Laura blinked rapidly, like she was trying to hold back tears or rage or both. Mom slammed her chair back and yelled, "You're abandoning your family, going off to sip pina coladas while we're here struggling." Dad stayed silent. His peacekeeping had dissolved years ago into quiet withdrawal. I stood, left the table, and locked myself in my room, packed a little more. I didn't need permission anymore. I was done asking. The next morning, Laura realized she couldn't use the Amazon account. Mom's phone had no data, bills went unpaid, the house descended into chaos. By the time I returned from work, the house was a war zone of guilt trips, tears, and screaming. Laura even said I was driving her to a breakdown. I made dinner, didn't say a word. That night, Dad knocked on my door. He looked worn beyond his 58 years. "Take me with you," he said simply. I nodded. No arguments, no speeches. I booked his ticket, told him to pack light. 2 days later, it was just the 2 of us and my friends Jesse and Marcus flying to Hawaii. Landing in Hawaii was like stepping into someone else's life. The air smelled of salt and sun. Not burnt toast or hospital disinfectant. Dad looked stunned, carrying his bag as if he still couldn't believe it. Jesse and Marcus waited, lounging on the rental car's hood, draped in plastic leis and oversized sunglasses. They looked ridiculous, but free. Dad shook their hands, nodded once, then just took it all in. We checked into the hotel, dropped our bags, and headed straight for the beach. Jesse cracked a beer, tossed one to Dad. We stood silently, watching the waves roll in and out. Dad muttered, "So this is what people mean when they say life is good." The first few days were perfect. We hiked volcanic trails, rented ATVs, and ate fish tacos until we couldn't move. Dad didn't complain once. At home, his knees ached just walking around the block. Here, he chased Jesse down dirt roads like a kid again. He smiled with teeth, something I hadn't seen in over a decade. One night at the hotel bar, Dad bumped into Rena, a woman heading to the bartender. They talked easily. The next evening, he told me he wanted to meet her for dinner. At first, I thought it was just a fling, but he kept disappearing in the evenings. Jesse joked, "Dad's about to ghost us for a beach romance." Marcus shrugged. "Let him. The guy deserves it." And honestly, he did. Dad looked younger, sharper. He wore a new Hawaiian shirt that didn't quite fit his usual grumpy veteran vibe. He even gelled his hair once. Borrowed Marcus's styling gel, probably. It was funny and sad and strangely beautiful all at once. The night before we flew home, Dad joined me on the balcony, silently sipping a neon drink. After a long pause, he said, "If I'd left your mother in '98, I might still be breathing." No tears, no emotion, just a cold fact. I said nothing. We just listened to the waves and the drunken laughter from the pool. The flight home was quiet. Dad was lost in his thoughts. Jesse kept shooting me looks like, "Is he okay?" I shrugged. I wasn't sure. Pulling into the driveway, the air felt heavier. Mom came out first. No hug, just asked, "Did you have fun leaving your family?" Laura stood behind her, arms crossed, glaring. Dad walked past without a word. I went to my room to unpack. Laura followed 5 minutes later. She cried, screamed, called me names, and then threw my TV to the floor. She poured detergent on my clothes, shredded a photo of me and my friends. "You don't deserve a good life if you won't share it," she spat. I didn't respond. I left the room, past Mom pretending not to notice, and found Dad in the kitchen eating leftovers like nothing had happened. I asked if he'd heard the chaos. He just nodded. "You think this is news?" The next morning, Mom called a family meeting. Dad skipped it, choosing golf with a neighbor he barely liked. Laura called it disrespectful. I thought it was the smartest thing he'd done in years. Mom presided like a judge. Laura paced, still in pajamas, clutching cold coffee like a weapon. I sat at the far end, arms crossed. Mom started quietly before the explosion. She talked about family unity and respect. Every word was aimed at me. Laura echoed louder and more dramatic. Then came the blow. "You have brought shame to this house. Your father should be ashamed. Running off to Hawaii while we suffer." Dad walked in, golf clothes, sweat on his face, disinterested. "Oh, is this the meeting? Could have told me. I'd have stayed out longer." Laura screamed he was letting me poison him. That we were conspiring? That Hawaii was the beginning of the split. Dad sat down, sipped his drink, and said, "Maybe if you two weren't so obsessed with control, people wouldn't want to leave." Silence. Laura stormed out. Mom stared as if she'd been hit. She said nothing. Just walked away. That night, Mom texted Dad she wanted a separation. Not divorce, just separation. She wanted to scare him. He ignored it, deleted it, and watched basketball. The next day, she packed. By afternoon, she was still in her bathrobe, pacing, mumbling, "I might leave, I might." She never did. 2 days later, Laura returned. No explanation. She trashed my room while I was at work. I came home to find her sitting on my bed like a queen. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I packed a bag, laptop, clothes, and a framed photo of Dad and me from Hawaii. Then I walked out. I rented a small place an hour away. Clean, quiet, no expectations, no chaos, no guilt. I left a note for Dad with my new address. He called that night. Good, about time. We started meeting for coffee, talking mostly about nothing. But sometimes, when he got quiet, I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Maybe this was the way it would finally get better. After I moved out, life took on a strange rhythm. The quiet was both a relief and a hollow echo of what once was. The house felt less like a prison and more like a graveyard of memories. I was free. but I wasn't sure if I was happier. Dad and I kept up our ritual coffee, talk about nonsense, occasional silences that said more than words could. He didn't ask much about Mom or Laura. When he did, it was with a sigh and a shake of his head, like he was tired of carrying the weight of their chaos alone. Laura, meanwhile, slipped into a spiral. At first, it was just angry texts, the kind you delete but still burn into your mind. You abandoned us. You'll regret this. Family is everything. And you threw it all away. But then the texts slowed. She stopped calling. She stopped showing up unannounced. It was like she'd hit a wall. Or maybe she finally saw there was nothing left to grab onto. One evening, I got a message from her. Can we meet? I debated ignoring it, but I needed closure. So I said yes. We met at a cramped coffee shop halfway between our apartments. She looked tired. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes told a story of sleepless nights and long regrets. She didn't waste time. John, I'm drowning, she said. Voice cracking. Everything's falling apart. Mom's gone cold. Dad's checked out, and I'm supposed to be the glue holding this mess together. Her hands shook as she stirred her coffee. I didn't want to ask, but I need help. Bills, loans, whatever, I can't do this alone. I listened, the old familiar ache creeping up my spine. The sister I'd tried to save again and again was breaking down in front of me. I took a deep breath. I'm done. Laura, I can't fix this anymore. You need to stand on your own. Her face crumpled, but there was no anger. Just raw, defeated sorrow. She left the cafe wordlessly, like she'd just lost her last lifeline. After that, the silence stretched. No more calls. No more threats. No more pleas. I thought maybe it was over. But life has a way of surprising you. One day, Dad showed up at my place carrying a beaten-up suitcase and a hopeful smile. I'm thinking of moving in with you for a while, he said quietly. I almost laughed. The idea of Dad living in my small apartment, sharing my cramped kitchen and folding bed, seemed absurd. But then I looked at his tired eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. Okay, I said. And that was the beginning of a new chapter. Dad's presence changed things. He brought calm, a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. We cooked meals together, shared long talks about the past and what we wished could be different. He never asked for more than I could give. Sometimes, late at night, he'd confess fears about Mom and Laura, about the family falling apart beyond repair. But he also talked about hope that maybe one day we could all find peace. Meanwhile, Mom was a storm on the horizon. She showed up unexpectedly one evening, standing on my doorstep like a ghost from a life I'd left behind. Her eyes were fierce, but her voice cracked as she said, John, we need to fix this family. I told her the truth. We're broken. Mom, you, Laura, me, Dad, we're all hurting. But I can't keep holding us together when it feels like I'm the only one trying. She looked away, the fight leaving her posture. I don't know how to fix it, she whispered, and for the first time I believed her. But old wounds don't heal overnight. Laura's chaos escalated again, job losses, missed payments, frantic calls for help. Mom oscillated between cold distance and desperate attempts to pull us back. Dad remained my anchor, steady in his support. One night, Laura came to my apartment, drunk and desperate. She cried, screamed, and finally collapsed on my floor, begging for help. I made her tea, sat with her through the night, and told her I couldn't save her. She nodded, but I saw the fear in her eyes. The fear of standing alone. In the weeks that followed, the family's fractures became clearer. Mom tried to rally the troops with vague promises of change. Dad's health waned under the weight of silent suffering. Laura bounced from job to job, never finding solid ground. Through it all, I clung to the small peace I'd found. I worked harder, focused on my life, and rebuilt myself piece by piece. The vacation I took wasn't just a trip, it was a break from the chaos, a chance to breathe, to remember who I was beneath the family drama. And now, sitting here, writing this, I realize something important. Sometimes, the hardest choice isn't to stay and fight. It's to walk away and find peace. Because peace isn't found in perfect families or fair fights. It's found in the quiet moments you claim for yourself. After Dad moved in, things settled into an unfamiliar rhythm. It was strange having him around. Not because we weren't close before, but because now we were sharing space, routines, and the quiet moments that fill empty rooms. There was no rush, no pretense, just two men trying to figure out how to be family without all the noise. Dad and I developed a kind of unspoken routine. We'd wake up early, sip black coffee on the small balcony, and listen to the city waking up below us. He told stories about his youth, stories I'd never heard before. It felt like getting to know a stranger who was also my father. One evening, as we sat in the living room watching a documentary about the ocean, Dad turned to me and said quietly, "You know, I never thought I'd feel this free again." I nodded, understanding more than I could say. Freedom had a price. For me, it was walking away from the family that I'd carried on my shoulders for years. Meanwhile, Laura's downward spiral deepened. She'd lost another job, and with it, her last bit of dignity. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. But no matter how much she wanted to ask for help, pride or anger kept her silent. Sometimes she'd text, sometimes not, but when she did, the messages were brief and bitter. One day, I got a text that just said, "I'm scared." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on setting boundaries. I told myself I couldn't fix her. I couldn't save everyone. Mom, on the other hand, was a different kind of storm. She oscillated between icy silence and fierce confrontations. The family meetings she insisted on felt less like attempts at healing and more like showdowns. She had that look in her eyes, a mix of hurt and determination that told me she wasn't going to back down without a fight. One such meeting was especially brutal. Mom stood at the head of the table, voice low but sharp. "This family is falling apart," she said, eyes flicking between me and Laura. "And it's because some of us don't want to take responsibility." Laura snapped back, her voice shaking with rage and pain. "You're the reason we're all broken, you and John, always picking sides, always pushing away." I stayed quiet. I'd learned silence was often the safest armor. The fights weren't just verbal. They seeped into the everyday. Mom would freeze me out, stop returning calls, and then flood me with guilt-laden texts about family and loyalty. Laura vacillated between pleading for help and lashing out in frustration. Dad tried to mediate, but even his calm was cracking. I remember one afternoon, Dad caught me cleaning up a broken glass on the kitchen floor. He looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, son. You're doing what I couldn't." Those words hit me harder than I expected. With the chaos at home, I found refuge in work and friendships. My two closest friends, Jesse and Marcus, became my anchors. They weren't family, but sometimes they were better than family. We spent weekends hiking, going to baseball games, or just sitting around with cold beers, talking about everything and nothing. Jesse had his struggles too, but he never judged me. Marcus, with his quick wit, kept things light when the world felt heavy. Their support was a reminder that family doesn't always come from blood. One night, a surprise visit shook things up. Laura showed up at my apartment drunk and desperate, begging for help. She cried like I hadn't seen before, raw, unfiltered. "I don't know how to do this without you," she whispered. I made her tea, sat with her through the night, but I was firm. "I can't keep saving you. Laura, you need to find your own way." She nodded, broken but somehow accepting. That moment was a turning point. I realized that the family I'd known wasn't coming back. I wasn't the problem. I was just the one who refused to play the role they'd written for me anymore. Still, despite everything, there were glimpses of hope. Dad, despite his exhaustion, started talking about dreams again. He mentioned maybe moving somewhere warmer one day, maybe starting fresh. He said he felt alive in ways he hadn't in years, and I believed him. But the road ahead wasn't without its bumps. Mom's bitterness lingered like a shadow. Laura's instability remained a worry, and Claire, my sister, hadn't given up either. She sent texts, some angry, some pleading. One message said, "You were supposed to be the foundation." I didn't reply, because I knew the foundation had cracked long ago. One day, Claire showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was different, tired, worn down. She asked for help. Bills, loans, support. I looked at her and said the words I'd rehearsed 100 times. "I'm done." She didn't cry or yell. She just left. And that silence felt heavier than any argument. Life was changing, and so was I. I found strength in the space I'd created, in the boundaries I'd drawn. I started therapy, trying to unravel the threads of guilt and expectation that had bound me for so long. I learned to say no. I learned that sometimes love means walking away. As I sit here writing this, I know the road isn't over. But I also know that peace is possible even if it looks different than I imagined. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The silence after Claire's departure stretched out like an endless winter. For the first time in years, I didn't hear the barrage of texts or the storm of arguments echoing through the halls of my mind. It was quiet, too quiet. But this time, the quiet was different. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of avoidance or pain. It was the space I needed to breathe. Dad and I grew closer in ways we hadn't imagined possible. The raw, awkward honesty between us was a balm for old wounds. One afternoon, while we were putting together a jigsaw puzzle in the living room, he said something simple but profound. "You're the strongest person I know." I didn't say anything. I just looked up and smiled a small, genuine smile. It felt good to be seen, to be acknowledged without judgment. The therapy sessions I started were hard, sometimes painfully so. I had spent decades trying to earn love and acceptance by being the fixer, the reliable one, the silent sufferer. Learning to break those patterns meant confronting uncomfortable truths about my family and about myself. One night, my therapist asked, "What would you say to your younger self if you could?" I thought about it for a long time. "Finally," I whispered, "you're enough. You don't have to carry their pain." That moment marked the beginning of a slow, steady healing, a process of reclaiming my identity apart from the roles they had assigned me. Meanwhile, Mom's attempts at control waned. She stopped pressing for family meetings and subtle manipulations. Claire's absence left a void she couldn't fill. I suspected she was struggling with loneliness masked by bitterness. Rachel stayed distant too, her online rants fading into silence. The toxic narrative she spun against me lost steam as fewer and fewer family members bought into it. Even Aunt Michelle, who had once sided with them, began reaching out less frequently. It was as if the entire family dynamic was shifting, the old patterns breaking apart. I found new purpose outside of family drama. I threw myself into work, started volunteering at a local community center, teaching kids how to build skills that could change their futures. Helping others reminded me that family isn't always defined by blood or history. Sometimes, it's about who shows up when it matters. Dad's visits became a comforting ritual. We'd cook together, sharing stories and memories, sometimes laughing, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, he said, "You know, I never thought I'd find peace, but here, with you, I do." I felt the weight of those words settle between us, a quiet acknowledgement of shared survival. Claire reached out sporadically, but the tone had shifted. Her messages were softer, less demanding. She sent photos of her jewelry business, a small online shop she'd started. I responded with encouragement, even though I knew the bridge between us was still fragile. We weren't close, but the ice had thawed just enough to allow for cautious hope. One unexpected day, I received a package, a small box with a note inside from Claire. It said simply, "Thank you for not giving up." Tears blurred my vision as I held the note. It was the first sign of genuine connection since everything fell apart. The holidays came and went without the usual chaos. I spent Christmas with friends who had become chosen family, people who accepted me without conditions or expectations. It was, hands down, the best Christmas I'd ever had. Looking back, I realized that breaking away wasn't just about leaving toxic relationships behind, it was about creating space to grow, to heal, and to rebuild. I learned that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to walk away from those who claim to love you, when their love comes with chains. As I write this, I'm grateful for the journey, the pain, the losses, and the unexpected blessings. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm finally free to define who I want to be, not who they said I should be. And maybe that's the real meaning of family. Story 3. I'd been sending my sister, Emily, $700 every week for nearly 3 years. No questions asked, no conditions. I thought that's what family was supposed to do. When she and her husband, Mark, hit a rough patch, no jobs, 2 kids, mounting bills, I stepped in without hesitation. I didn't wait for them to ask. I told myself this was my role, my responsibility. At first, it felt like gratitude, but slowly, the thank yous dried up. Instead, there were veiled complaints. "You don't understand what real hardship looks like," Emily would say. Or, "Some people aren't as lucky as you." She rolled her eyes at photos of my wife and me on vacation. She once called my wife spoiled at a family barbecue because we bought a new car. Yet, every time Emily needed something, I was the first to get the text. Rent was short, the car broke down, medical bills stacked up, baby formula ran out. I paid for it all, always hoping for a sliver of respect or appreciation, but it never came. They just wanted more. Then came that Saturday night, the night everything shattered. It was a typical family dinner at my parents' house: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, kids darting around, Mom was chatting about her garden. Dad had the game on low. Everything normal until Emily dropped the bomb. "You don't help enough," she said, calm but cutting. "Stop being so cheap." I blinked, thinking she was joking. No one laughed. Dad, without looking up, said, "She's not wrong." Something inside me went cold. I looked at the people I'd been supporting for years and realized they saw me as stingy, selfish, not enough. I smiled, stood up, and said, "Then live without my money." My wife didn't argue. She quietly stood, gathered our kids, and we left. That night, I canceled every payment. The weekly transfers stopped, rent payments stopped, shared accounts closed, grocery cards cut off. I was done. The next morning, Mark appeared at my door. No call, no warning, just pounding, desperate, pleading. "We're about to be evicted," he said. "We don't even have gas to get to the food bank." Emily screamed from the van behind him, demanding, accusing me of betrayal, selfishness. I didn't open the door. I listened as Mark's voice shifted from pleading to panic. I knew opening that door meant drowning in their stories again. The old me would have caved. Not anymore. 3 hours later, the pounding stopped. That afternoon, my phone blew up texts and calls from my mom, Emily, my extended family. Think of the kids. You're punishing innocent children. How could you do this? Not one person asked if I was okay. No one asked why I had cut them off. They already knew the answer, they just didn't want to hear it. By Tuesday, the calls spread. My uncle texted, cousins messaged, spreading a softened version of the story, painting me as the cold-hearted brother who abandoned family. I ignored it all, until my mom showed up at my office. She barged in like she owned the place. "You embarrassed Emily? You hurt her kids." I stayed calm. "You all sat there while she called me cheap." I said, "You agreed." She looked lost. "She's struggling," she said. "And what about me?" I asked, "Am I not allowed to get tired to say no?" "You're better off than them," she replied. That was the truth no one wanted to say out loud. I told her then I was done funding people who resented me for having what they refused to earn. I wasn't their bank, their landlord, their free ride. She left without another word. That night, Emily texted me, "You better fix this. You won't like what happens if you don't." I stared at it, then blocked her. She was right, she wouldn't like what came next. By Thursday, the silence was suspicious. No calls, no messages. Then, a call from their landlord. Emily and Mark had lied to him, saying I was going through something and payments would resume soon. 2 weeks late on rent, notice to vacate coming. I felt nothing. That night, sitting on my back porch, memories hit hard. The anniversary dinner Emily guilted me into paying for. The laptop I bought for Mark's freelance business that he pawned 3 months later. They hadn't just used me, they resented me for being able to help. Then it clicked. This wasn't about hardship, it was about pride. They hated that I had what they didn't, so they needed me. And when I stopped giving, they turned on me. I wasn't going down without a fight. The next week, I started pulling back everything. I canceled their family cell phone plan still under my name. I shut down the Costco card my parents abused for non-essentials. And I took back the SUV I'd bought for Mark, filing for repossession quietly. No warnings, no second chances. They needed to wake up and see what they'd taken for granted. Friday night, Emily called from a new number. 5 minutes of rage, self-pity, and manipulation. You're tearing the family apart. I scrolled through a flurry of texts from her to my wife: daycare costs, groceries, medical bills, rent shortfall, car problems. I took screenshots and showed my wife. She blocked Emily. Saturday, my mom texted, "They're here for a few days." Sunday, I saw Emily's Facebook post. "Back where we're truly loved. Family first." They'd moved in with my parents. I laughed when Mom called, asking for help with utilities. "No," I said, "I helped for years. I'm done." They underestimated how fast exhaustion turns into finality. Then came the final move. I cut off power and water to their house. It was still under my name from years ago. Mom texted frantically. Dad called, pleading. Emily sent a text filled with threats and guilt trips. But I stood firm. That weekend, I took my family on a tech-free trip, just us, a cabin by the lake. Silence, stars, peace. But when I returned, I deleted every voicemail. No more negotiations. No more apologies demanded. No more exhaustion. Weeks later, a note from Mom arrived at my office. A last plea to come back to the table. I shredded it. I blocked every number, changed my locks, hired a lawyer. And when they showed up at my door, I stood my ground. No more chances. No more family drama. For the first time, I was free after that weekend getaway. Silence was supposed to be the end of it. I thought cutting ties would bring relief. It did, but it also opened a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Monday morning started with a text from my dad. Nothing emotional, just a business-like note. Need to talk. Call me. I ignored it for a few hours, waiting to see if he'd call again. When he finally did, his voice was low, tired. Son, this isn't what I wanted. Neither was I. Dad told me how Mom and Emily had been visiting family friends, playing the sympathy card, spreading stories that painted me as the villain, heartless, greedy, cold. I wasn't surprised, but hearing it from him stung. They say you cut them off, left the kids starving. I sighed. I did what I had to. Dad was quiet. I could almost hear him picking his words carefully, like he was walking through a minefield. You should think about maybe meeting them halfway. I let the silence speak for me. That week, the harassment began in earnest. Emails from Mom flooded my inbox, pleas, accusations, veiled threats. Messages from Emily swung from sobbing apologies to bitter insults. Texts from Mark begged for understanding, for one last chance. But then came the strangest part, a letter from the school principal. Someone had reported concerns about my kids' emotional welfare, claiming I was isolating them from their extended family. The allegations read like a poorly scripted drama, coercive household behavior, family estrangement. I knew who had filed it. The caseworker came to our home. She was professional, polite, efficient. She asked questions, observed our interactions, checked in with my kids. After a thorough visit, she smiled and said, "There's no cause for concern here." When I asked if she knew who had filed the complaint, her expression shifted. "Yes," she said quietly. "False reports like this aren't uncommon in family disputes." That cold rage welled up inside me again, but this time it was calculated, focused. My sister had weaponized the system. She was trying to scare me back into submission by threatening my children. I called my lawyer first thing. We filed for a cease and desist order against Emily, Mark, and my parents' harassment, slander, malicious interference. He gathered everything, text screenshots, emails, the false CPS report. But I didn't stop there. I contacted the landlord of my parents' home. They didn't own it, they were renters. I gave him the full background on Emily and Mark's history of missed payments, my own actions, and the threats. The landlord thanked me and promised to reconsider their lease terms. Next, I reached out to the church. Mom and Emily often leaned on the church community to bolster their victim stories. I emailed the pastor calmly, respectfully outlining the situation, providing documentation. Within days, Emily's online posts about betrayal and family fractures vanished. Her Facebook account disappeared altogether. My wife and I changed locks and phone numbers. We met with a counselor for the kids to make sure none of this nonsense would scar them. We instructed the school that only we could pick up the kids, no exceptions. Then came the final step. One night, I sat at my desk and wrote a message not to them, but to myself. A list titled, "Things I No Longer Feel Responsible For." My sister's rent, my parents' bills, Mark's unemployment, their endless expectations, their gossip, disappointment, and distorted version of family. I saved it, printed it, folded it, and slipped it into my wallet. Since then, their names still surface in conversations, tagged in social media, whispered about at family gatherings. I don't respond. My wife and I recently took the kids on another trip, this time to a remote mountain cabin. No signal, no distractions, just wood smoke, starry skies, and silence. For the first time in years, I felt free. I wasn't running or hiding. I had locked the door and kept the key. And yet, despite the pain and betrayal, I don't regret it. Family should be a sanctuary, not a drain on your soul. If love is conditional on your wallet, it's not love. I gave until I was empty. But now, I'm building for myself. The weeks after I cut them off were quieter than I expected, but the quiet wasn't peace. It was the eye of the storm. The emotional fallout was brutal, not just for me, but for everyone involved. I felt the weight of it in small ways. In my kids' questions, in my wife's worried glances, in the hollow spaces left where family should have been. One afternoon, as I was fixing dinner, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Again. "Can we talk, just us? I want to fix this." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button, then deleted it. I knew what fixing this meant. It meant more lies, more guilt, more endless demands. I wasn't ready, not then, maybe not ever. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. Work became my anchor. the place where I could lose myself in deadlines and projects, not family drama. My kids thrived. Surprisingly, without the noise of constant crisis, their laughter returned. They asked fewer questions. They slept better. One evening, I took them to the park. The sky was a swirl of pink and orange. The air smelled like fresh grass and promise. My son ran ahead, his laughter ringing like music. My daughter sat on the swings, pushing herself higher and higher. I watched them, feeling something I hadn't in years: hope. But hope was fragile. One morning, my wife found a letter slipped under our door. No return address. Inside, a thin sheet of paper with a single sentence. "You'll regret this." No signature. No explanation. Just a threat. I showed it to my lawyer. He wasn't surprised. "This kind of intimidation is common," he said. "Keep documenting everything. If anything escalates, we'll act." That night, I sat with my wife and the kids. We talked about safety, about boundaries, about the future. "We're stronger than they think," I said. My wife squeezed my hand. "I believe you," she said softly. The next few months were a strange mix of normalcy and tension. My parents and Emily kept their distance mostly, but Hannah, she was like a shadow I couldn't shake. Random texts, occasional calls, social media posts tagged with my name, always with a bitter edge. Hannah showed up at my office. No warning, no apology, just raw desperation. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. I need help." I looked at her disheveled, exhausted, broken. Part of me wanted to believe she meant it, but I'd been down this road before. I shook my head. "I can't," I said. "This ends now." She left without another word, and for the first time, I didn't watch her go. I started therapy not because I thought I was broken, but because I needed tools. Tools to rebuild boundaries. Tools to heal wounds I didn't even know I carried. One session, my therapist said something that stuck. "You're not responsible for fixing what others choose to break." I nodded. It felt like permission. Slowly, I began to fill the spaces left empty by my family. New friends, old hobbies, quiet mornings with coffee, long walks with my kids. And as the months passed, I realized something important. Peace isn't about having perfect relationships. It's about making peace with the ones that aren't. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my family, my real family, to hold tight to the people who truly care. One afternoon, my dad called. His voice was softer, more honest. "Son, I'm sorry, I was wrong." It wasn't a grand apology, no promises, just words. I replied, "Thank you, that means something." We didn't discuss the past, we didn't plan the future, we just talked. For the first time, it felt like a bridge, not a battlefield. That night, I sat on the porch. The stars were bright, the night was still, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Because hope isn't a feeling, it's a choice, and I chose it. Time passed. The storm I'd been living in slowly faded to a dull roar. The silence that followed was heavy, but it gave me room to breathe and to think. I stopped waiting for apologies that might never come. I stopped hoping for a family reunion that felt like a dream. Instead, I focused on the here and now. My kids, my wife, the life we were building away from the chaos. It wasn't easy. Some nights, the silence felt deafening. The absence of familiar voices became a constant reminder of what was lost. But those same quiet nights also brought clarity. I started setting new traditions with my family, the one I chose. We cooked together on weekends, made forts in the living room, watched movies without distractions. I saw my kids grow, laugh more freely, learn to trust the calm. Work gave me purpose beyond the walls of family drama. My promotion wasn't just a raise, it was a symbol, proof that perseverance pays off. Even when those closest to you don't see your worth. One evening, I got a message from my sister. A short text, "I'm sorry, I want to talk." My heart skipped. Old habits pulled me toward the familiar pain. But I hesitated. I thought about the years of hurt, the countless times she'd used me. I decided to reply, but on my terms. "Let's talk. When you're ready to be honest." We met in a quiet cafe, the kind with soft lighting and no distractions. She looked tired, older than her years. Her eyes held regret. "I was wrong," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I took too much. I hurt you. I'm sorry." I didn't rush to forgive. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. But I listened. We talked for hours. About mistakes, about expectations, about what family should really mean. It was the start of something fragile, but real. Meanwhile, my parents stayed distant. Their silence was loud. I stopped waiting for their calls, stopped expecting change that wasn't coming. Instead, I focused on my dad. Our bond had shifted, not perfect, but honest. Sometimes he called just to say hello. Sometimes he dropped by, no agenda, just to sit quietly. One Sunday afternoon, he surprised me. He brought an old photo album, pages worn, filled with memories of better times. We flipped through the pictures, laughed at the awkward hairstyles, smiled at the faces we once were. That was before everything got complicated, he said. I nodded. But maybe it's never too late to try. That night, I told my wife about the photo. She smiled, squeezed my hand. We're making our own memories now. And we were. I started volunteering at a community center, helping families who struggled not because they owed me anything, but because I wanted to give back. It felt good. The kids joined a local soccer league. Their smiles on the field were contagious. At work, I took on new challenges. Met people who respected me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One afternoon, I got a call from Hannah. This time, it wasn't a demand. It was a question. Can we try again for the kids? I took a deep breath. This time, on different terms. We agreed to start small. Visits supervised, conversations honest, no promises, just a willingness to try. Months later, I found myself at a family gathering, not with my birth family, but with friends who had become family. Laughter filled the room. No judgments, no expectations, just acceptance. I realized then that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes, it's who chooses to stand by you when the rest walk away. That night, as I tucked my kids into bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The past still cast a shadow, but it no longer controlled me. I'm not perfect, I still carry scars, but I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward. And moving forward means choosing yourself even when it's the hardest choice. So here I am, stronger, wiser, ready for whatever comes next. That's the end of the story. Thank you for reading. If you've been through something similar, remember you're not alone. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the greatest growth.